The first light of dawn spilled across the prairie like a ribbon of gold unraveling from the sun's quiet hands. It touched the jagged edges of the canyon walls, brushed the tops of the grasses that whispered to one another in the morning wind, and caught in the dust that drifted lazily above the trail. Somewhere far off, a horse's hooves clattered against the earth, rhythmic and steady, a heartbeat echoing the pulse of the land itself. And there, in a quiet hollow carved from the embrace of rock and sagebrush, he woke, not in the bed of a home, nor in the comfort of fire-warmed blankets, but beside her, she of the silent strength, of the eyes that held rivers of unspoken stories. The chief's daughter, and though the world was only beginning to stretch its bones in light, he felt as if time had paused just for this breath, this fragile, suspended moment. Her eyes were closed still, lashes catching the early sun, faint shadows of night lingering in the curve of her face. There was neither fear nor surprise in the gentle rise and fall of her chest, only a calm that seemed impossible, a quiet command of the world even as it whispered its secrets at the edges of the horizon. He watched the way her hair fell across her shoulders like strands of dark river, how her fingers brushed the dry earth with the lightest curiosity, as if greeting the ground itself. He shifted, a little stiffly, the dust in his hair, and she stirred, eyes opening slowly, measuring him in the dawn's soft glow. There was no accusation, no demand, only recognition. The prairie held its breath with them. It was a strange awakening, this one. Confusion licked at the corners of his mind. Had he dreamed this, or had the land itself pulled him into its embrace? Words felt heavy, unnecessary, so he did not speak. She, too, remained still, as though understanding that some moments are too delicate to be broken by speech. Instead, there was a gentle exchange in the tilt of her head, the almost imperceptible movement of her hand brushing dust from his sleeve. In that quiet intimacy, he sensed the weight of the world pressing in from beyond the canyon edges. Traditions, expectations, and the 321 warriors waiting just beyond the hills. But here, in this suspended dawn, there was only the soft touch of presence, the murmur of wind through grass, and the subtle pulse of life shared between two people who had somehow found themselves together at the fragile cusp of morning. Her gaze, steady and serene, carried stories he could not yet name. Tales of resilience in a world that expected silence, courage disguised as stillness. She had grown under the heavy eyes of those who underestimated her, beneath the careful instruction of her father, the chief, who loved her fiercely yet watched her world through the lens of tradition. And still, she had found moments like this, quiet, unclaimed, where she could simply exist. He saw that strength reflected in her calm, her measured breathing, the subtle tension in the way she shifted her weight as though the land itself were hers to negotiate. And for the first time, he recognized a truth he had never thought to name. The world is not always loud, not always violent, not always demanding to be conquered. Sometimes, the quietest souls carry the heaviest burdens, and sometimes they carry the most grace. A crow cawed in the distance, its voice sharp and solitary against the soft chorus of wind and rustling grass. The sound broke the moment just enough to remind him of the coming day, of the expectations that waited, sharpened and ready like knives behind the canyon ridges. Yet, even with that reminder, there was no rush, no panic. The dawn was patient, the light gentle, and for now, the world could linger in this single, quiet heartbeat. He turned his eyes to the horizon. The sun climbed slowly, spilling more gold across the land, revealing the first hints of movement in the distance. Shadows of horses flickered across the rising heat, tiny figures that promised presence without intrusion. Scouts, perhaps, or warriors, preparing for the day to come. The world outside this hollow was stirring, but inside, between the girl and the man beside her, there was still an unspoken agreement. Let the morning stretch before it demands its due. Her fingers brushed his hand lightly, and he flinched at the sensation of connection, at the sudden awareness of skin against skin, the vulnerability of being seen in silence. He wanted to apologize, or explain, or retreat into some convenient fiction of innocence, but the words would not come. They were unnecessary. She already knew him better than he knew himself, perhaps, and in that knowledge was a gentle forgiveness, an understanding that needed no speech. She stood then, slowly, like a hawk unfurling wings to test the wind. He rose as well, unsure of what was expected, yet instinctively following the rhythm of her movements. Dust clung to their boots, wind tangled their hair, and still the world held its breath. Somewhere in the folds of the distant canyon, the first warriors were gathering, yet they did not break the spell of the moment. The prairie had room for both anticipation and stillness, and for now, stillness prevailed. They walked together toward the edge of the hollow, steps careful, measured, each footfall a note in the silent music of morning. She did not speak of the wedding to come, of the obligations that awaited her beyond the hills. And he did not ask. There was no need. The weight of the world would follow soon enough, but in the golden light of dawn, there was room for curiosity, for tentative understanding, for the quiet thrill of shared space. A breeze rose, carrying the scent of sage and dust and distant water. He inhaled, slow and deep, letting the earth fill his lungs. And as he exhaled, he understood something he had never known. Courage is not always shouted from rooftops. Sometimes courage is measured in silence, in the bravery of existing fully, even when the world expects you to bend. And she, this girl of quiet strength, of unyielding grace, was entirely courageous. The sun climbed higher, painting the canyon walls with colors that seemed too vivid for a world so harsh. Somewhere beyond the ridges, life moved, plans unfolded, and the 321 warriors were assembling, their presence a reminder that the morning would not linger forever. But for this brief moment, it was enough to breathe, to feel, to exist, to understand, perhaps for the first time, that connection, real, unspoken, patient, was its own kind of revolution. He looked at her again, and she smiled, not a smile of triumph or jest, but of understanding. There was no rush. There was only the land, the dawn, the quiet stirring of hearts learning to recognize each other. And in that recognition, he felt the first real tremor of something profound, something neither of them would name yet, but both would carry into the day, into the waiting warriors, into the uncharted promises of the morning. The prairie wind swirled around them, brushing dust and gold in a slow, deliberate dance. Somewhere far off, a horse neighed, and the echo rolled across the hills. The moment stretched, delicate and rare, and though the day demanded its duties, the dawn had given them this. A breath held in amber light, a quiet communion of two souls standing at the edge of change. And there, beside the chief's daughter, he understood that the world was waiting. But for now, the world could wait. The morning had fully awakened, and the canyon walls glowed like weathered copper under the sun's gaze. Shadows stretched long across the prairie, but they did not touch the girl. Her presence seemed to bend the light, to hold it in a quiet reverence. She walked a few steps ahead, boots stirring dust, hair catching the rising sun like threads of dark silk. He followed, careful to match her pace, careful not to break the fragile rhythm of the world around them. They spoke little. Words were unnecessary, too blunt for the delicate thread of connection they had begun to weave. Instead, he watched the way her hands brushed the sage, how her fingers lingered on rocks as if memorizing their contours, how her eyes, bright yet wary, scanned the horizon without fear. She had seen much, endured more, yet carried herself with a grace that betrayed none of it. The prairie carried whispers of her life, the weight of her father's expectations, the unyielding eyes of the tribe that measured each step she took, the invisible lines of tradition she was expected to walk upon with care. Yet in this quiet dawn, she moved beyond all of it, and he felt, for the first time, the subtle pull of admiration that ran deeper than attraction, a respect that demanded no confession, only acknowledgement. He remembered the stories he had heard of the chief's daughter, how many had approached her with charm and arrogance, thinking beauty was weakness, thinking courage could be bent by desire. She had endured it all, but the world had never truly seen her, had never truly known her. Not until now. And then there was the other man, the one the world expected her to choose. The first man, handsome, loud, confident in ways that masked the hollowness beneath. He would arrive soon enough, carrying the shallow certainties of the world, ready to demand compliance, to treat tradition as armor and love as convenience. But for now, he was absent, and the quiet space between dawn and responsibility allowed for reflection, for understanding, for truth. They came to a small stream, its water rippling over smooth stones like silver threads weaving across the earth. She knelt, cupping the water with hands as delicate as the leaves that danced on the wind, and drank without hesitation. He watched her reflection in the water, strong, yet soft, unyielding, yet willing to bend without breaking. He spoke then, softly, as though afraid his voice might fracture the fragile calm. The words came slow, hesitant. You always move like the wind carries you. She looked at him, eyes half smiling, as though measuring whether his words were a threat or an offering. "I move as the land allows," she said finally, voice barely above the whisper of water. "And sometimes as the heart permits." He nodded, unsure how to respond, but grateful for the honesty, grateful for the openness that came without demand. There was no performance here, no expectation, only truth, quiet and unadorned. The first man would not have understood this. He would have judged her, measured her by shallow standards, misread courage for arrogance, independence for pride. But the quiet man, the one beside her now, he saw, not her as broken, not her as a puzzle to be solved, but her as whole, brave, alive. As they rose from the stream, she led him toward a rise overlooking the valley. From there, the full scale of the day began to unfold. Small flags caught the breeze, horses shifted in silent readiness, and figures moved like shadows along the ridges. Scouts, perhaps, were the earliest of the warriors. Their presence was measured, deliberate, a quiet insistence that the world beyond this hollow waited. She paused, hand on a rock, her gaze distant. "They will be here soon," she said. Not a question, not a warning, only a statement, steady as the rising sun. He understood. He did not need to ask. And in that understanding, there was comfort, a silent acknowledgement that this moment, though fleeting, mattered. She spoke then of her life, carefully, deliberately, as if testing the wind before letting words carry. She spoke of the expectations placed upon her, the weight of the chief's gaze, the subtle sting of those who assumed strength could only exist in loudness. Each word was a fragment of story, each pause a space for reflection, and each glance a window into a life rarely understood by outsiders. He listened fully, without interruption, without judgment. His own story, shallow in comparison perhaps, was irrelevant. What mattered was witnessing her truth, holding space for it, and learning from the quiet courage it revealed. The first man arrived then, the sudden clatter of boots and horse hooves breaking the fragile rhythm of their world. He was as expected, handsome, confident, quick with a smile meant to charm, words meant to command. He did not pause to look at the land, nor at her eyes. Instead, he saw what he assumed she was, a prize, a symbol, a fulfillment of expectation. And she, seated upon the rise, did not rise to meet him. She did not lower herself. She merely regarded him with the calm, measured strength that had become her signature. In that look, he felt a flicker of something he had not anticipated, that she might choose differently, that she might defy the world's shallow assumptions with nothing more than the courage of being herself. The first man spoke, words smooth, practiced. "It is time, you know. The warriors await. The chief expects." But she did not answer immediately. She let the words hang, heavy in the morning air. Then she turned to the quiet man beside her, her gaze lingering with something unspoken yet understood. "And I am ready," she said finally, softly, "to choose the path my heart allows." The first man's smile faltered. Charm could not command honesty, and he had misread the measure of her spirit. He would have to reckon with the truth that strength does not always shout, that courage is not always loud, that love cannot be forced into expectation. The quiet man felt a tremor beneath his ribs, a thrill that was tempered by awe. He did not step forward to claim her, did not speak grand declarations. He only stood beside her, patient, steady, a reflection of the respect he carried in every action. And in that presence, she felt something she had rarely felt. The world was wide, yet it could still be safe, if only for a moment, if only with the right witness. They watched the valley together, the rising sun painting gold over dust and stone, the first warriors taking position like silent sentinels of tradition. The wind stirred the flags, the horses shifted in soft anticipation, and the prairie held its breath. There was a quiet intimacy here, born of shared understanding rather than fleeting desire. They did not speak of love, not yet. They spoke instead of trust, of recognition, of courage acknowledged in silence. And that, perhaps, was enough for now. Even as the day approached, with its noise, its duty, its 321 warriors poised for the ceremony, there was a fragile calm between them. The world could wait, for just a moment, as two souls measured each other, acknowledged each other, and learned to navigate the space between expectation and truth. She spoke again, softly, as if to herself and the wind both. They think they know me. They think tradition can bind me. But some choices are mine alone, and some courage cannot be borrowed. He nodded. And I see it, he said, even when they cannot. In the valley below, the shadows of the first man and the approaching warriors grew longer, sharper. The quiet man did not flinch. He did not need to, because courage, he realized, was not always proven with swords or loud declarations. It was proven in presence, in patience, in a willingness to stand beside someone, to see them fully, and to honor the path they chose. She turned her gaze back to him, a small smile playing on her lips, the first hint of warmth in the cool morning. Then we shall see the day unfold, she said, steady, resolute, yet gentle. And so they waited together, two figures against the rising sun, the prairie stretching endlessly beyond, the canyon holding its quiet witness. The warriors would come. The first man would arrive. The traditions would demand their due. But in that moment, suspended between dawn and responsibility, the quiet courage of hearts unseen by the world bloomed fully, gently, like the first light of morning brushing gold across an unclaimed prairie. The wind carried the scent of sage, of dust, of distant fires. Somewhere beyond the horizon, life waited, and the 321 warriors prepared. But here, beside the chief's daughter, the quiet man understood a truth that would guide him through the day and beyond. The strength of a heart is measured not by the battles it fights, but by the courage it holds in silence. And in that understanding, there was peace, a fragile, luminous peace, delicate as morning mist, yet steady as the rising sun. The sun climbed higher now, painting the canyon walls in molten gold, setting the dust ablaze in shifting patterns that danced across the prairie. Shadows of the 321 warriors stretched long and sharp, their forms steady and precise, like silent echoes of a land's unyielding will. Horses pawed at the ground, their breaths visible in the cool air that lingered despite the sun's growing warmth. Somewhere, the first man's boots struck with impatience, carrying arrogance and expectation in each heavy step. But here, on the rise overlooking the valley, the chief's daughter and the quiet man remained untouched by the outward rush of preparation. They moved as though the world beyond them, though vast, demanding, and waiting, was only a suggestion, and they alone held the right to choose the rhythm of their steps. The valley below shimmered with motion. Warriors arranged themselves in perfect alignment, banners fluttering, the glint of polished weapons catching the morning light. Every detail had been rehearsed, every glance and stance calculated to reflect honor, obedience, and tradition. Yet none of it touched the fragile truth unfolding above, where courage was measured in silence, and the weight of a choice carried more power than the mightiest blade. She knelt again, adjusting her boots, brushing the dust from her skirts. Her eyes, steady and calm, traced the shapes of warriors in the distance. She did not fear them, nor did she bow to expectation. Instead, she measured, considered, and prepared herself. Every choice she would make today would echo through the canyon walls, through the dust-strewn plains, and through the hearts of those who would witness. The quiet man observed her in silence, his presence a steady counterpoint to the world's restless noise. He did not offer grand gestures, nor did he attempt to command attention. He was patient, he was steady, and in that steadiness, she found an unexpected comfort. It was a presence that honored truth without imposing it, a quiet courage mirrored in every deliberate step he took beside her. The first man approached then, his boots striking the stones sharply, his presence intrusive, heavy, demanding. Charm lined his voice, smooth and practiced. "It is time," he said, "the warriors await. The chief expects your choice. Tradition cannot bend." She did not respond immediately. Her gaze lingered on the valley, on the 321 figures poised in silent expectation, and then she turned her eyes to the quiet man beside her. In that glance, unspoken but clear, lay a simple truth. She would not be guided by expectation. She would not be moved by pressure. She would choose the path her heart permitted, not the one the world demanded. The first man's smile faltered, a crack appearing in the mask of certainty he had worn so carefully. He stepped closer, words sharpened with authority. "Do not think the land or the warriors will wait for hesitation. You must decide." Her voice, calm yet firm, finally broke the quiet. "I will not decide for the world," she said. "I will decide for myself." The wind carried her words across the valley, brushing the faces of the assembled warriors like a soft ripple, stirring questions and awe alike. The quiet man nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing at his lips. He had expected nothing less. He had witnessed her courage in the moments of stillness, in the dawn's quiet breath, and he knew the depth of the choice she would make. It was not about defiance, nor about rebellion. It was about truth. In the valley below, whispers of movement stirred among the warriors. The first man's confidence wavered. He realized that his certainty had no power here. He could demand, he could command, but he could not compel the heart, nor could he bend courage that stood unwavering in the face of expectation. The heroine descended the rise with measured steps, each footfall deliberate, each breath an affirmation of her autonomy. She did not rush. She did not falter. The quiet man followed, keeping pace beside her, neither leading nor lagging, merely sharing in the rhythm of her choice. They reached the edge of the assembled warriors, the 321 figures forming a sea of eyes and expectation. The first man stood beside them, arms crossed, a veneer of control masking his unease. He had expected compliance, ritual, a predictable path. Instead, he found stillness, patience, and a heart unwilling to bend. The heroine's gaze swept across the ranks, not in fear, not in deference, but in recognition. Each warrior was a piece of her world, a witness to her courage, yet she did not seek validation. She sought only honesty, and in that, the world could either bend to witness it or fall silent in awe. Turning to the quiet man, she extended her hand, not in demand, not in command, but in an offering of choice, trust, and acknowledgement. "Will you walk with me?" she asked, her voice soft yet carrying the weight of mountains and rivers, steady as the canyon walls themselves. He took her hand without hesitation, steady, firm, respectful, honoring the courage it took to extend trust in a world that had never fully seen her. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic flourish, only the quiet acknowledgement of mutual understanding. And in that simple act, the world seemed to pause, holding its breath once more in reverence for courage born of truth rather than expectation. The first man recoiled slightly, his arrogance faltering. Words of command and charm fell uselessly into the morning air, replaced by the undeniable presence of authenticity, patience, and love that demanded no proof. He had misjudged the measure of strength, mistook compliance for bravery, and now found himself standing before a truth he could not conquer. The quiet man and the heroine moved through the ranks of warriors, their path deliberate, unhurried, each step a testament to courage, to choice, to the subtle power of trust. Whispers passed among the figures, questions hung in the air, but the movement was unbroken, guided by the steady, invisible thread of authenticity that connected two hearts willing to honor each other fully. As they reached the center of the valley, the sun climbed higher still, painting gold across dust, stone, and banners. The first man stepped back, defeated not by sword nor by shouting, but by a quiet truth he could neither command nor bend. And the heroine stood at last, her gaze sweeping across the sea of warriors, the world held at the edge of her courage. She took a breath, deep and steady, and in that moment, all expectation, all pressure, all the weight of tradition fell away, leaving only choice, only courage, only the quiet power of two souls aligned. The quiet man stepped closer, not to lead, not to claim, but to witness, to honor, to share in the unspoken bond forged through patience, presence, and trust. The valley seemed to shimmer, the dust rising like mist around them, the flags and banners trembling as though even the earth recognized the significance of what was unfolding. And in that golden light, the heroine made her choice, not for approval, not for spectacle, but for truth. A soft smile touched her lips as she extended her hand fully to the quiet man. He took it, the gesture simple, intimate, powerful, and together they turned toward the warriors, toward the waiting day, carrying with them the quiet thrill of courage realized, trust affirmed, and love recognized without words. The first man remained silent, a shadow among shadows, a reminder that not all hearts could bend, that not all expectations could command, and that true strength resides not in demand but in the quiet affirmation of choice. The warriors, 321 strong, held their formation, eyes wide, breath held, witnessing a moment that would be remembered beyond the dust and canyon walls. The heroine's courage had shifted the balance, and the quiet man's patience had anchored it, creating a space where truth and love could flourish. And above them all, the sun rose fully, a golden witness to a quiet revolution. The prairie, the canyon, and the dust seemed to bend around the presence of honesty, patience, and courage. Two hearts had chosen without fear, without demand, and the world, for a fleeting, precious moment, was in perfect alignment. The first man turned then, slowly, leaving the center of the valley, defeated by the subtle power of authenticity, and the heroine and the quiet man remained, hands joined, hearts steady, courage full. They had not fought with weapons, nor had they shouted declarations, yet victory had been claimed, not for conquest, but for truth, choice, and the slow bloom of understanding. And in that stillness, they could feel it, the tide of anticipation, the energy of the 321 warriors, and the weight of a day that had begun with expectation, but now followed the quiet rhythm of hearts fully known to each other. They would face the wedding, the traditions, the watchers, but they had already won the greater battle. Courage in silence, trust without demand, and love that spoke not in grand gestures, but in presence, patience, and understanding. And so they waited together, the sun high, the dust dancing in golden light, hearts steady, knowing that the day ahead, though fraught with ceremony and expectation, was theirs to walk, theirs to shape, and theirs to hold in the quiet revolution of truth realized. The canyon trembled softly under the rising sun, dust lifting in waves across the prairie, caught in the wind like golden motes of memory. Down below, the 321 warriors stood in perfect formation, a silent sea of anticipation, their eyes fixed upon the heroine who had claimed the dawn, and upon the quiet man who had walked beside her with unwavering presence. Every muscle, every horse, every glint of polished steel seemed poised for ritual, for tradition, for expectation, but what awaited was something neither they nor the world had fully imagined. The heroine stepped forward, her skirts brushing the sunlit dust, her gaze steady, unwavering, carrying the quiet power of truth realized. She felt the weight of all eyes upon her, yet none of it pressed her down. Instead, it lifted her, as if the canyon itself leaned in to witness courage unfold. The quiet man stayed by her side, neither leading nor trailing, simply present, steady as the canyon walls themselves. The first man's shadow flickered at the edges of the assembly. He had expected obedience, compliance, and perhaps admiration for his confident manner, but he found neither. Instead, he saw a truth that could not be commanded, a courage that could not be bent. His smirk faltered, the shallow pride that had carried him here dissolved like mist under the sun. He took a step back, silent, powerless to impose expectation over authenticity. The heroine raised her head, voice calm, yet carrying across the valley. "I choose my path," she said, simple and deliberate, "and I choose the one who sees me, not the one who expects me." A hush swept over the valley, a quiet acknowledgement of courage unbroken, a recognition that love and respect are not demanded but earned in presence and understanding. The warriors, 321 strong, absorbed the moment in reverent silence. They had come expecting ceremony, ritual, perhaps the triumph of tradition, but instead they witnessed something greater, a heart fully known, a choice fully claimed. The quiet man extended his hand, the gesture unassuming yet profound, and she placed hers within it, steady and unafraid. It was a simple act, but in it lay the weight of trust, the acknowledgement of mutual courage, and the promise of something rare and unshakable. No words were needed. The land, the canyon, and the assembled warriors all seemed to lean in to witness, understanding in a way that transcended speech. The first man turned then, slowly, his arrogance melting into a quiet recognition of his own limits. He stepped back from the center of the valley, defeated not by force, nor by argument, but by the subtle, undeniable power of authenticity. The heroine and the quiet man did not watch him leave with triumph or vindictiveness. They held only the present, the moment, and each other. The warriors stirred, subtly at first, and then with a slow, reverent murmur of acknowledgement. Some lowered their heads, others touched their weapons in silent respect. The chief, who had watched from the edge of the formation, allowed a faint, proud smile to form beneath his weathered features. He had expected obedience, tradition, compliance, but he had witnessed courage, and it shone brighter than any ritual he could have demanded. The bride and groom, though no formal words had been spoken, walked slowly to the center of the assembly. Their hands remained joined, their eyes locked not on expectation, but on the truth they carried in silence. There was no flourish, no ceremonial shouting, only the steady presence of hearts fully known to each other, a quiet defiance that spoke louder than any words could. The first man lingered at the edge, watching, understanding at last that some victories are silent, some choices uncommandable, and some courage cannot be bent to expectation. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sage and dust, of distant rivers and hidden fires. It seemed to whisper across the valley, bravery is quiet, love is patient, and truth cannot be taken by force. The warriors now stepped back, one by one, giving space to the moment, their alignment perfect yet yielding to the quiet revolution that had unfolded before them. The heroine breathed deeply, the cool morning wind brushing her face, carrying with it the scent of possibility, freedom, and the unspoken bond she shared with the quiet man. He spoke then, softly, words that were meant only for her. "You have done what no one else could," he said, "and you did it with courage and grace. The land itself will remember this moment." She smiled, faint and luminous, a curve of lips that carried mountains and rivers, storms and sunsets. "And I will remember you," she whispered, her voice like the rustle of grass in the wind, steady and intimate, "for seeing me as I am, and for walking beside me without ever demanding me to be less. The sun climbed higher still, spilling light across the valley, painting the warriors, the dust, and the two figures in a brilliance that felt almost sacred. Birds rose from the edges of the canyon, their wings catching gold, circling above in slow, reverent arcs. The prairie seemed to hum beneath their feet, the land itself acknowledging the courage of hearts fully aligned. The chief stepped forward then, voice low but carrying, filled with a rare warmth. She is chosen with honesty and strength. And in that choice, we see the courage of the heart. His eyes lingered on the quiet man, a nod of respect passing unspoken between them. You have earned her trust, and in that, you have honored us all. The first man lowered his gaze, stepping aside, finally understanding that respect and integrity outweighed charm and bravado. He mounted his horse and rode off slowly, the sun catching the dust behind him like a halo, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson learned too late. The heroine and the quiet man stood together, their hands joined, the morning wind weaving through their hair, carrying the subtle fragrance of sage, dust, and freedom. They did not need words. The moment itself was a language, a narrative of courage, trust, and quiet love that spoke louder than any ceremony could. The warriors began to scatter, some whispering, some nodding in quiet admiration, all witnesses to the subtle triumph of truth and heart over expectation. The chief remained, his eyes soft, proud, and filled with something like wonder. He understood now that courage is not always loud, that strength is often measured in patience, and that love, when earned in silence and respect, outshines tradition itself. The bride and groom walked slowly to the edge of the canyon, the land stretching endlessly before them. Their hands remained entwined, their eyes fixed on the horizon, not with fear or doubt, but with the luminous certainty of hearts that had chosen freely, honestly, and fully. The valley, the canyon, the prairie, each seemed to hold its breath in awe, the dust dancing in sunlight like sparks of memory, witnesses to a choice made with courage, patience, and love. A hawk rose from the ridge above, circling high in the sky, a sentinel of the canyon, its cry sharp and clear. It was a reminder of the world beyond, the freedom to move, to live, to choose. The heroine turned her gaze toward it, the faintest smile touching her lips. "We are ready," she said, voice steady, serene. And the quiet man, standing beside her, nodded. Together, he said simply the word carrying mountains, rivers, and deserts, the weight of truth and the lightness of freedom. The day had begun with expectation, with ritual, with 321 warriors waiting for ceremony. But it had transformed into something far greater, a quiet revolution of hearts, an affirmation that courage is measured in patience, love is proven in presence, and the truth of a soul cannot be commanded or bent. And as they walked down from the rise, hand in hand, the land seemed to sigh with relief, the dust rising in golden swirls, the wind carrying the soft promise of possibility across canyon, prairie, and river alike. The sun fully claimed the sky, bathing everything in warmth, light, and hope. And in that brilliance, the heroine and her quiet man moved forward together, their hearts aligned, their choice unwavering, and the world, briefly, beautifully, transformed by the power of courage, patience, and love. The canyon would remember them, the prairie would whisper their names in the wind, and the story of the chief's daughter and the quiet man who saw her would ripple through time like a golden ribbon stretching across dawn. They had faced expectation, tradition, and shallow certainty, and they had chosen truth. And in that choice, they found freedom, love, and the quiet thrill of hearts fully known. And so, dear friends, we leave them there, hands joined, hearts steady, courage full. Sometimes, the bravest battles are not fought with weapons, but with patience, presence, and the courage to choose truth over expectation. Remember this when you face your own dawn. Trust your heart, honor those who walk beside you, and know that love and courage can bloom quietly, fiercely, and beautifully. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Like, share, and subscribe to witness more tales of courage, love, and quiet revolutions of the heart.